Good evening and welcome to the Housing Security Consumer Resources Forum. This event is hosted by the DC Department of Insurance, Securities and Banking, otherwise known as DISB, in partnership with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and in collaboration with our district government sister agencies, the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Department of Human Services, and the Office of the Tenant Advocate, and our nonprofit partner, Housing Counseling Services. My name is Philip Edmonds, and I'm a director at DISB and the moderator for this very important housing security webinar. On behalf of our commissioner, Karima Woods, I want to thank each of you for joining us this evening. This forum is scheduled to run from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. We have a great panel of housing experts whose goal tonight is to provide you with important information and connect you to relevant resources to help address housing concerns and hardships. If you are a homeowner, landlord, or tenant with questions about financial assistance programs, foreclosure, eviction, or other related matters, this is the forum for you. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so please start thinking about questions you may want answered during this session. Before I introduce our expert panel, I would first like to invite Deputy Commissioner Sharon Shipp to give welcome remarks. Sharon?
Thank you, Philip. Good evening. I'm Sharon Shipp, the Deputy Commissioner for the DC Department of Insurance, Securities and Banking, also known as DISB. On behalf of Commissioner Karima Woods, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our Housing Security Consumer Resource webinar. I would like to thank our webinar partners and speakers for their time and expertise. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Housing Counseling Services, the Office of the Tenant Advocate, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and the Department of Human Services. We know that during these challenging times, it is important to share housing information and resources that will help district residents live securely in their homes. It is worth noting that 315,000 homeowners have a mortgage in the District of Columbia. And after a year of trying conditions, currently 3.9% of DC homeowners are at least one payment behind on their mortgage. So tonight, we have a terrific lineup of experts who are here to tell you about vital housing risk mitigation strategies and programs. You will hear about our financial assistance programs, including COVID-19 relief programs, resources available to homeowners, landlords, and tenants who are dealing with foreclosure issues and evictions, public health emergency changes related to housing, and home purchasing tips. Now, just a little bit about DISB. I would like to tell you that the Department of Insurance, Securities and Banking is a regulatory agency charged with overseeing financial services entities. But we are also committed to educating district residents and business owners about their financial health and future. As part of Mayor Bowser's Fair Shot initiative, we provide a host of financial programs and resources designed to empower you financially. So be sure to visit DISB's website at disb.dc.gov for more information on our programs, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I am truly feeling the excitement from the audience for what our presenters are going to share. So without further ado, thank you all for joining us, and I will turn things back over to our moderator, Philip Edmonds.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner, for those comments. You mentioned that 3.9% of district homeowners are at least one payment behind on their mortgage. That's approximately 12,000 people. Although that is below the national average, we in district government will use the resources and tools at our disposal to help bring that percentage down. One of the ways we can do that is by giving district residents the information they need to act. So without further ado, let me explain our format and introduce our panel. Each panelist will have approximately 7 minutes to speak. We are going to let all 6 experts make their presentations before we allow questions. When the presentations are completed, we will begin our question and answer session. At that time, please use the chat feature on your device to write and send us your questions. If you are calling in on the telephone, however, please use the *3 feature to put your hand up and the *3 feature to put your hand down. A member of the DISB team will read your question and direct it to a specific panelist once you put your question through the chat feature. With that in mind, let's turn our attention to our first speaker, Jessica Russell, Manager, Mortgage Markets at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Jessica.
Great. Thank you so much, Philip. I really appreciate all the work that you've done putting this together, and we're so happy to be here today. My name is Jessica Russell. I'm a program manager at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And today I'm happy to be sharing some help and resources for homeowners, renters, and landlords who've been affected and are having housing trouble during the pandemic. So just to go ahead and get started with a quick disclaimer on the next slide. This presentation is made by me as a CFPB representative on behalf of the CFPB. It's not legal interpretation, guidance, or advice, and so any opinions or views might. So with that out of the way, let's dive in. So we are nearly 2 years into the pandemic, and as those challenges continue, so too do the challenges that people are facing paying for housing. So if you or your clients or someone you know is having trouble paying for housing, you're definitely not alone. More than 7.5 million families nationwide are at risk of eviction and foreclosure. Additionally, an estimated 9.5 million tenant households are behind in their rent. And we know that this pandemic has also been especially hard for communities of color. Black and Hispanic families are nearly twice as likely to report being behind on their housing payments, whether that's rent or mortgage, than white families. So there's a lot there. Next slide. But the good news is there is help out there. And so we want to make sure that you're aware of some of those resources. One of them is the CFPB's housing portal, which we've really designed to make people aware of what resources they have to help consumers understand what protections they have and what actions they can take. This is put together by a whole sort of alphabet soup of federal agencies, including the CFPB and many of our other sister agencies and partners. And it has, as you can see, it focuses on homeowners, renters, and landlords. And we've got a whole slew of information there for you. We have videos, plain language explanations, links to relevant resources, guides on what actions to take. I'll also note that our resources are available in a variety of languages, as you can see there kind of at the top just below the banner. So please check this out. You can get here at consumerfinance.gov/housing. So again, for folks on the phone, that's consumerfinance.gov/housing. So the first thing we want to talk about, next slide, is about homeowner protections, right? So the main way that homeowners have found relief during the pandemic is through what's called forbearance. And basically the way that works is that it is a program that lets homeowners temporarily pause their mortgage payments, by calling up their mortgage servicer. And the mortgage servicer is just the company that you make your payments to. And during the whole course of the pandemic, more than 7.7 million people nationwide have gotten a forbearance. Most of those have exited and are back on track, but there are still about 800,000 who are still in forbearance today and getting ready to exit in the coming months. Another another protection we want you to be aware of are foreclosure protections. And so the one highlighted here is that the importance of submitting an application, of talking to your mortgage company and submitting the application for help. So the law here is that if a borrower submits complete application after the foreclosure process has started, but more than 37 days before the actual scheduled sales date, the servicer can't complete the foreclosure until they've actually evaluated the application for all of the options available. So again, if you haven't talked to your servicer and you're in trouble, definitely reach out to them. They can help you, and make sure that you submit an application, because that can help you in more ways than one. The last protection and source of help that I want to highlight for homeowners is the Homeowner Assistance Fund. This is there's more than 10 billion allocated nationally to help people with mortgage payments and other things. And others later on in the talk will give you more details about the DC specific program. Moving on, let's talk about renters. The CFPB has a rental assistance finder tool, which basically lets you locate and contact the appropriate program for you and for your area to help get money for COVID-related rent shortfalls. And again, you'll hear more about the DC specific program later today, but if you know people who are in other areas, this can help them make sure they find the right program for them. Moving on.
Ms. Russell has 1 minute left.
Great, thank you. Moving on, there are other renter protections available on our website to help people understand what rights they have and to be able to report a bad landlord. And next, we also have resources to help people if they've lost housing. So we recognize some people have been evicted or gone through foreclosure. So we have resources to help people as they get back on their feet. So getting help finding safe and temporary housing, figuring out how to manage your bills. We have a number of guides for that. And then lastly, we have the CFPB accepts consumer complaints on a wide variety of financial products. So if you do have an issue with your mortgage company, or you believe there's a debt collector who's using an unfair practice related to collecting your rental debt, you can send us a complaint and we will work to get you an answer from that company within 15 days. So there's a whole variety of resources available out there for you. And you can access all of these from our website. Again, that's consumerfinance.gov/housing, and that'll get you connected with the resources available. So that's it for me. And with that, I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Jessica, thanks so much. And everybody, just remember, jot down your questions. We'll hold all questions until the question and answer session. We will next hear from Mr. Benjamin Arnold, the Foreclosure Prevention and Mediation Administrator with the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. Ben?
Good evening. Thanks, Philip, and thanks, Jessica, for the great information. I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Jessica was talking through about the resources available in DC for foreclosure prevention and mediation. So I'm going to start off talking about the current landscape of foreclosures and the most recent legislation and the pandemic relief that is available. Next page. So currently there is a foreclosure moratorium due to the public health emergency related to the COVID-19 pandemic. This recently got extended. It was originally scheduled to expire on February 5th. It has been extended till June 30th, 2022, with an exception to the moratorium if the property is vacant or abandoned. In addition to that, there is a 60-day extension if you are currently being reviewed for the Homeowner Assistance Fund. And DHCD is going to kind of touch upon that a little bit further in the presentation. Next slide. So there's two different ways that a lender can foreclose in the district on residential mortgages. The first is through the court system, DC Superior Court, and that's referred to as a judicial foreclosure. The second is non-judicial foreclosure, which is through DISB. The homeowner does not get to choose how a lender files for foreclosure, but there is assistance in both the judicial and non-judicial settings. Typically, a foreclosure cannot be initiated unless a homeowner is 120 days delinquent. That means that you're 4 months behind. A lender is not allowed to proceed with the foreclosure, and Jessica mentioned it before, if the borrower is being reviewed for a loss mitigation program. This is referred to as dual tracking. So that is not allowed by law. Slide. The judicial foreclosure process consists of a lender filing a complaint with the DC Superior Court and seeking foreclosure. The homeowner is served a summons and a complaint. At this point, a homeowner should definitely reach out to a legal service provider or a housing counselor. And I'm going to kind of touch upon the resources that are available to prevent foreclosure as I move through this presentation. The homeowner must file a response to a complaint within 20 days, and they must attend the court dates. If a homeowner does not attend the court dates, the lender will receive a default judgment from the judge, allowing the lender to proceed with holding a foreclosure sale. So mediation is available in the judicial foreclosure process as well as in non-judicial. The non-judicial foreclosure process, which is administered and overseen by DISB and the mediation administrator, myself, the lender has to complete paperwork and send documentation to the DISB mediation administrator and to homeowners, all homeowners of record. This package consists of a notice of default, a mediation election form, and additional documentation referred to as the notice of default package. The lender must also record the notice of default with the DC Recorder of Deeds, making it public record within 10 business days from issuance of the notice of default. A homeowner has 30 days to opt in mediation. I want to stress that this program for the non-judicial foreclosure mediation program is an opt-in program. So the homeowner does have to opt in. If the homeowner does not elect for mediation, then a final mediation certificate will be issued to the lender, allowing them to take the next step to foreclosure, which is also referred to as the notice of intent to foreclose. And I know I'm covering a lot of information, and I'm looking forward to the question and answers, and also giving my contact information at the end of this presentation. So the lender cannot file for foreclosure unless they have a final mediation certificate. Next slide. What should a homeowner do if they receive a notice of default? The homeowner should contact a housing counselor as soon as they experience a financial hardship. And I'm going to give some additional resources and information for the foreclosure prevention hotline. You should not wait. You should be proactive as a homeowner if you are falling behind or you are behind. So that's very vital to get relief ahead of time and instead of waiting for a foreclosure to be initiated. But if you do receive a foreclosure notice, the requirements to elect mediation are as followed. To send a $50 check or money order payable to the DC Treasurer. In addition to that, to complete the mediation election form and loss mitigation package and send to both the mediation administrator and then also to your lender. And you'll receive that information in 2 different envelopes when the lender initiates the notice of default. DISB will then schedule a mediation with a trained mediator. The role of a housing counselor, and we have housing counseling services as part of the panel, and Ronald Clarkson will kind of touch upon this, but it's pivotal, and the resources that are available are plenty when it comes to housing counseling. They provide education, but they provide assistance, and more importantly, they act as a liaison between the homeowner and the lender. So prior to mediation, how can a housing counselor assist? They can assist by assisting with applying for the loss mitigation programs, perform budget counseling to see what is a sustainable payment that could be afforded by the homeowner that is facing distress. educate homeowners on the district programs that may assist. I mentioned previously the Homeowner Assistance Fund. You'll receive more information on that. Facilitate the servicer contact and determine options and receive status updates. So a housing counselor can assist with that. So you're not on your own. There's help out there. Support and explain the mediation process and help with filling out the mediation election package. And also they can refer you to a legal service provider if warranted.
90 seconds left, Mr. Arnold.
Yeah. The role of the housing counselor during and following mediation is as followed. Attend mediation sessions, act as an intermediary, and then following mediation, they can continue to work and make sure that the homeowner is staying on top of whatever agreement is reached. Next slide. So foreclosure mediation requirements, there is a good faith standard. So there's actually teeth in the law that requires the lenders to perform good faith and negotiate in good faith, meaning review for all loss mitigation programs and authority to make decisions during mediation. The mediation must start within 90 days from the notice of default if the homeowner elects mediation, and can be up to 3 sessions, and will conclude within 180 days of the notice of default. Excellent. The role of the mediator is in charge of the process, not the outcome. The homeowner and the lender will work through the outcomes. Foreclosure mediation outcomes, there's several outcomes that can be made. I kind of want to touch upon the settlement agreements that we see within the mediation program. Next slide. Loan modifications, repayment plans, forbearance, short sale, deed in lieu of foreclosure, cash for keys, and graceful exits. Don't wait for mediation to apply for these loss mitigation programs. Foreclosure prevention services that are available. There's free foreclosure prevention support available through the DISB administered foreclosure prevention contract with housing counseling services. The one thing that I want everyone to be aware of is the foreclosure prevention hotline is 202-265-2255. There's also housing counseling, and then up to 5 hours for a limited legal scope review and mediation assistance that's available. And there's my contact information. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Philip.
Ben, really appreciate it. A lot of information. Everybody out there, I think the most important slide is this last slide that's up on the screen now. This is Ben's contact information, and you can reach him at the disb.dc.gov. He mentioned housing counseling services in his presentation, so it makes sense to turn the microphone over to Mr. Ronald Clarkson, who is the Director of Communications and Outreach at Housing Counseling Services. Ronald.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edmonds. And I also want to give great appreciation to the folks at DISB for supporting the work that we do at Housing Counseling Services. Housing Counseling Services has been in the District of Columbia for 50 years now. We were established in 1972, and we've been helping residents in DC primarily, but also in Maryland and Virginia in dealing with their housing obstacles, whatever they may be. These days, we are very busy working on a lot of different things that have come out of the result of the current pandemic that we're all facing. And it has had an impact on foreclosure as well as folks facing possible eviction. Next slide, please. All right. Some of the things that we do, and it's a litany of things. Of course, the heart of what we do is provide housing counseling. And we have HUD certified counselors, folks who have taken exams and studied and prepared themselves to provide the information and get access to the resources needed to try to assist people as much as possible. We go along and work on budgeting, money management. We deal with fair housing, homelessness prevention, dealing with tenant issues, trying to make sure that folks are able to stay in their apartments and resolve issues that they have with their landlords. We help home buyers as well, folks who are confronted with high home prices and trying to give them the resources and assistance they need to put themselves in the best position possible to buy a home right here in the District of Columbia. We work with programs such as Inclusionary Zoning, affordable dwelling units, the single family residential rehab program. Also, we help folks who are managing condominiums and cooperatives in understanding what it takes to manage those organizational structures. And then we provide home equity conversion mortgage counseling, also known as reverse mortgage counseling. And that is something that is federally required anytime someone does a reverse mortgage. And we're here to help people in that situation. And then, of course, foreclosure prevention, which my colleague, Mr. Arnold, spoke of momentarily, where we're actively involved not only in the mediation process, but we're actually in the courtroom able to meet people and talk with them about their specific situations. Next slide, please. All right, so as HUD certified counselors, as I said, we touch on all of these different issues. I won't go into detail on them right now in the interest of time, but hopefully we will be able to discuss some of these in more detail as we go later on in today's presentation. Next slide, please. All right, now with regard to homelessness prevention, this focuses a lot of effort on helping folks who are tenants renting here in the District of Columbia, facing some of the challenges of not only high rents, but also maybe reduced incomes that have come over the past couple of years. Our counselors are able to talk with people about their situations, identify financial resources such as the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, also known as Ewrap, which our colleagues at Department of Human Services can focus some more time on later on. We also have programs that work with people who are suffering from HIV or AIDS, and there's specific assistance that can help them not only with money to help with their rent, but also with food and things like that. And then we have programs to help veterans through our Veterans Supportive Services Program. And this provides them with some assistance in transitioning from a situation where they might be facing homelessness into housing stability. Next slide, please. All right, with foreclosure, Mr. Arnold went over some of the details. I won't get into those right now, but suffice it to say, we are actively involved not only in the counseling part of it, but we're active in working with folks in the court system, dealing with whatever situations they're confronting as far as their foreclosures are concerned. Also reviewing their financial circumstances, making sure that they have the ability to pay going forward, and hopefully structuring a situation where the future mortgage is affordable for them. And also helping folks who might not be in a position to pay a mortgage going forward, and understanding that there may be a need to transition out of that home altogether. Next slide, please. We also have a team of folks who work with tenant groups, tenant buildings, helping them understand the relationship that they have with their landlord, working with those landlords, and also addressing building-wide condition issues. We have some of those throughout the city that can become problematic periodically, and we want to work with those tenants and forming tenant organizations to keep those buildings safe and affordable. In addition, we work with folks who are facing what we call TOPA, and that is the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, where there have been basically an onslaught, if you will, of opportunities where landlords are looking at possibly selling their buildings, and tenants have the first opportunity to consider purchasing those buildings. We want to make sure tenants understand all of their rights in that process, understand how they could successfully do this with some help from some additional resources, and understand what they can do in terms of their decision making. You know, they have options. We want to make sure they know about those options. Next slide, please. We also offer webinars, tons of webinars. Every week we're holding mini sessions where we're working with people to educate them about the various services that we provide, and working with each of our different counseling avenues that we have, where we support them through a classroom type of situation. If someone is interested in participating in a webinar, feel free to reach out to us. We will be glad to get a copy of our webinar schedule out to you. Next slide, please.
2 minutes, Mr. Clarkson.
All right, and this is our contact information. Our website address is housingetc.org. Our phone number, 202-667-7706. And of course, you can reach out to us by email at info@housingetc.org. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Clarkson. Appreciate all the information that you just provided. With that, I think I want to turn things over to Ms. Nicole McEntee, who's a program analyst for education and outreach at the Office of the Tenant Advocate, otherwise known as OTA. Nicole.
Thank you so much, Philip, and thank you for having us here. We're happy to participate in this and be able to speak to people in such a way. So we at the Office of the Tenant Advocate are an independent agency, and we assist tenants only, so primarily tenants who live in the district. So whether or not a tenant is rent controlled or rent control exempt, or whether or not a tenant pays a market rate rent or some sort of subsidy is attached to their rent, whether it's IZ or a housing choice voucher, we help all tenants in the district, no matter which condition you meet. Next slide, please. So a quick origin story about our office. We were created in 2006, and we were originally under the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, or DCRA. But then in 2007, we became an independent agency, and we've had the same chief tenant advocate, Joanna Shreve, since inception. Next slide, please. So what do we do? Our mission statement states that we have 4 different departments which operate to help tenants throughout the district. So we provide technical advice and legal services to tenants. We educate tenants about their rights. We advocate for the rights and interests of renters in the legislative context. And we provide financial assistance in extreme scenarios and emergency housing. Next slide, please. So this essentially demonstrates those 4 departments. So we have a legal department, a education and outreach department. That's the branch I fall under, a policy advocacy department, and of course, emergency housing. So I'll talk a little bit about a few of these to sort of highlight the best touch points for tenants when dealing with our office. Next slide, please. Thank you. So first of all, the main touch point where tenants are going to reach our office is through our legal representation. So we operate a tenant hotline phone number, which is 202-719-6560. And tenants are able to call this number and receive free technical advice and legal services regarding disputes with landlords. So anything from a tenant who is not able to get their security deposit back from their landlord to a tenant who is concerned about eviction, or a tenant who doesn't understand a clause of their lease. Any of those sort of scenarios are one in which a tenant could call our office and receive free advice from either our case management specialist or our attorney advisors. And what our staff will do is we'll provide advice and develop actions to address the issue, and in some cases actually take it to court as well, or refer to outside legal aid services. Next slide, please. Our education and outreach department educates and informs tenants about their rights and rental housing matters. So we primarily provide trainings and webinars. We hold a monthly renters' right training. We do lease 101 trainings, TOPA trainings, eviction trainings, and tenant association trainings. And then we also have reference materials and forms available for distribution to tenants and on our website. So we maintain lists of tenant organizations. We hold classes, and of course we hand out the Tenant Bill of Rights. Next slide, please. Our emergency housing department actually deals with very specific scenarios in which the government will close down housing for fire or flood. So in these cases, these very specific scenarios, we can help tenants get hotel accommodations, financial assistance, storage, and coordinating services with other district agencies like the Red Cross. So hopefully tenants do not have to interact with us in this manner through our emergency housing department, but we are there in case they do. And this is actually a unique service that DC offers that other jurisdictions do not have. DC was the first in the country to have a emergency housing department associated through their local government to provide these services to tenants. Next slide, please. So we all wanted to provide some updates on legislative changes that have happened throughout the pandemic because it's been ever evolving and we've had to adapt as it evolves over the past 2 years. Legislation has changed, almost every 6 months. And so we want to ensure that tenants are properly informed as to what their rights are on any given day. So the public health emergency has ended. Landlords are now permitted to begin filing for eviction. They could first start that process in October if they met several criteria. Namely, the criteria was that a landlord had to apply for rental assistance on the tenant's behalf first, and then wait for a certain period of time before they were permitted to begin the filing process. As of January 1st this year, rent increases are now permissible in DC. There was a freeze on rent increases for the past almost 2 years. And other eviction filings not related to non-payment of rent. So for example, lease violation eviction filings are now permitted as well. Now, before filing to evict, a landlord must have certain things. So they must have a basic business license. They must provide notice to tenants in writing before filing, and they must wait a minimum of 30 days, in some cases 60 days, after the notice was provided to the tenant before they may actually file in court. If the eviction is for non-payment of rent from the public health emergency, so if the tenant had a balance from the COVID period during the public health emergency, then the landlord is required to offer a payment plan application to the tenant first. And then state EC funds have been depleted, but Ewrap, or Emergency Rental Assistance Program funds, are still available. So we encourage any tenant who is concerned about eviction or has past due balances to investigate whether they qualify for Ewrap, and also to apply for a payment plan with their landlord because they're entitled to the right to do that. Next slide, please.
2 minutes, Ms. McEntee.
And I just quickly wanted to highlight some other resources that OTA offers. So as I said, we offer a monthly renter's right training every third Thursday. So please reach out on our website or on our social media to get in touch with us to attend one of those trainings. We also have a bank of YouTube tutorials which answer common questions. So rather than contacting our office and waiting to speak to a member of our legal team, we've had a huge number of increase in cases over the past 2 years. So there are a lot of people who are trying to speak to our legal team, but there are some common questions that we can answer for you in a tutorial video, so you can get a much quicker, immediate answer. So please check out our tutorial videos. We also offer posters and flyers and forums available to help spread the word that we are out here and available to tenants as a resource. And then, of course, we do tenant association trainings and TOPA trainings. So if you yourself in a building, or you know of a building where maybe they have poor housing conditions that they're looking to get remedied, or maybe the building is about to go through a sale, they can contact us and schedule a sort of customized training tailored to that tenant association situation so that we can offer assistance. Next slide, please. And lastly, I just wanted to leave our contact information available for anybody who's looking for more information. Our phone number is 202-719-6560. That's that tenant hotline phone number. And then our website is ota.dc.gov. And thank you very much. I will turn it back over to Philip.
Nicole, great. Thanks so much. I hope everybody who has joined us who rents were taking copious notes and taking down that information about your YouTube tutorials. That was great. Thanks so much. Next, I'd like to turn our attention to Mr. Danilo Palantir. He is the Affordable Housing Preservation Officer and Senior Advisor at the Department of Housing and Community Development. Danilo, all yours.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here. I'm here on behalf of Drew Hubbard, who is the Interim Director of the Department of Housing and Community Development. Next slide, please. So I'm going to run through a quick presentation this evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about median family income, because that's something that, in terms of the programs of the Department of Housing and Community Development, that's important to understand. Then I'm going to walk through a very quick overview of DHCD, and then pull out a couple of programs that we run that seem particularly relevant to this discussion tonight. And then I'll wrap up with some information about connecting us. So next slide. So just very quickly, I may mention median family income at various times during this evening's presentation. And the reason I do that is because housing programs are largely based on this notion of what the median family income is in an area, and then sort of relative to that, who is low income and so forth. So obviously, if you live in Washington, D.C., what you consider to be low income is very different than if you live in, let's say, Mobile, Alabama, where in general incomes are a lot lower. So currently in the District of Columbia and the surrounding region, HUD says that the median family income of a family of 4 is $129,000. Next slide, please. And so what that means is that when I talk about 30% of median family income, I'm talking about a child care worker or a janitor with 1 child or a preschool teacher with 2 children or a hotel desk clerk. Those are the sorts of folks that we're talking about at 30% of median family income. And as you move up, and you can see, for those of you who can see the slide, it's sort of different income levels until we get to about 80% of median family income, which is where in general our programs are targeted. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so a lot of folks are familiar with the Department of Housing and Community Development, but they're often only familiar with one part of the agency. And so this slide, and the text may be small for some of you, basically runs through this in the next slide, the things that the department does. So what we have here is the first two, the Rental Conversion and Sales Division and the Rental Accommodations Division, are regulatory agencies that help in implementing the regulations of the district. The first one, it runs our condominium conversion, condo and cooperative conversion program, and the second one is in charge of implementing rent control. Then we have the Development Finance Division, and this is one that people are very familiar with. This is the part of our agency that assists in financing affordable housing. It has over $1 billion worth of affordable housing financing that it's done. The next group is the Property Acquisition and Disposition Division. This is an organization that acquires vacant and blighted properties and vacant lots and redevelops them or turns them over to those who will redevelop them for housing and other uses. Next slide. Then we have the Residential Community Services Division, and this is a division that funds a large number, and I'll talk about this at the end of the slide, a large number of community-based organizations, including our partners like Housing Counseling Services, to provide services to the District of Columbia. We have our Portfolio and Asset Management Division, and these are the folks that actually manage the portfolio of affordable housing, or better said, sort of keep an eye on the financing and make sure that folks are doing the right thing after the housing is created. We have an Office of Program Monitoring, which sort of makes sure that we're complying with all our federal grants. We have a Housing Preservation Unit, which is what I lead, that tries to make sure that we preserve the affordable housing we have and that people have sort of affordable housing and can stay in their homes. And then we have the Inclusionary Zoning Division, and that's a program that I'll talk about in a minute. Next slide. So the Inclusionary Zoning is one program I've decided to highlight. And this is a program that comes about because DC has an inclusionary zoning law. And essentially every building with 10 or more units must provide a certain proportion of its square footage for affordable housing. So it's 8 to 10% of the square footage in every new building with 10 or more units has to be provided for affordable housing. And they have to meet an income qualification at 50, 60, or 80% of median family income. So that's what I talked about before. So sort of in that low and very low income range. And the difference with inclusionary zoning is that you have to apply, you have to get on a list beforehand, and the housing is allocated by a lottery. So that is, sort of you can sort of get on our list, and as new buildings are produced, you'll be made aware that there are units available, and you can say, I'm interested, and then your name will be entered in the lottery. And there's a priority for DC residents and people who work in DC. And by and large, that means that these units are reserved for folks who are DC residents. Next slide. As I said, Development Finance Division is the group that uses local resources like our Housing Production Trust Fund and our DC tax expenditures in various ways, or various tax programs, to build affordable housing. But we also use a lot of the programs you may have heard of at a federal level, like the Low Income Housing Tax Credit, Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership, the National Housing Trust Fund, and then the Housing Opportunities for Person with AIDS, so HOPWA. And what this division does primarily is we put all those funding sources into one consolidated request for proposal, and then developers, nonprofits, others put in proposals to use that money to produce affordable housing. Next slide. And these are the kind of projects that that division does. They tend to be the larger projects, and they really can be everything from, completely new construction to some of our preserving some of our older buildings. Next slide. Then another program many of you may be familiar with is the Homeowner Assistance Program, Home Purchase Assistance Program. And that program assists low and moderate income borrowers with down payment and with loan assistance. Next slide. So the HBAC program, again, it's targeted. And so those who are very low income, again, 50% of median family income, they can qualify for up to $80,000 of assistance. And then there's also assistance with closing costs. And then if you're a district employee or a district provider, policeman or fireman, there's additional assistance that you can provide. And the key here is that this loan does not need, for the very low income individuals and low income individuals, it does not need to be repaid until you sell your home or you refinance it. So there are no payments when you have this loan until you sell your home or you refinance it. Next slide.
About 90 seconds, Ms. Bill.
Okay. Then, as was mentioned earlier, the single family residential rehab program. Currently, this program is available to replace roofs and provide mobility and accessibility modifications. And you can see the eligibility criteria here. And we can talk about that if people are interested. Next slide. And then finally, we have a new program. So you see here, it says coming soon. And this is the Federal Homeowner Assistance Program. And it allows individuals to have, we can assist individuals with paying mortgage arrears, condominium fee arrears, back taxes, missed insurance payments, utility and internet arrears, and provide counseling through this program. Right now, we're running it as a pilot in Ward 7 and 8, but as Director Hubbard just announced, it'll be rolling out citywide this spring. The key here is that you have to be below 150% of median family income, which is a little higher than we often go, but a lot of the services are restricted at 100% of median family income and below. And you have to be a current owner occupant in the District of Columbia, and you have to have experienced financial hardship after January 21st, 2020. So it doesn't have to be COVID related exactly, but it has to be during the period of COVID. Next slide. So there's a couple of different ways to get in touch with the department. What I've got here is a couple of resources that are available. DHCD Housing Resource Center, when non-COVID times, is open Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. in our offices on Martin Luther King Avenue. We have a dchousingsearch.org, which is a free listing service that provides easy access to information about housing opportunities in District of Columbia. And then a newer resource, frontdoordc.gov, is a resource that you can use to either be as a prospective home buyer or as a current homeowner to find all kinds of assistance that can help you, including the programs I've mentioned here today. Next slide. So as I said, we fund a number of affordable housing organizations, what we call community-based organizations, and they do a variety of things from housing counseling to home ownership to home rehabilitation, sort of help folks get connected with all those programs across the city. Tenant Opportunity Purchase Act and counseling in general. And so as you can see here, we've got a large number of organizations, and they do sort of as they're able a number of different services. So again, you can contact our offices to be put in touch with those organizations. Next slide. So here's our phone number and again, our various ways to get in touch with us. I will hand it back to Philip. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Danilo, great. Appreciate that, and super excited about the COVID recovery program coming live in the spring. I know there's going to be a lot of interest in that program, so I appreciate you mentioning that. I think our last expert speaker for the evening will be Joseph Lippy, who is the Stay DC Program Manager at the Department of Human Services. Joseph, turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you guys so much. I'm not Noah Abraham. That's my boss. I'm covering for him today. He's the Deputy Administrator of the Family Services Administration within DHS. But I'm happy to be here as the Program Manager. Next slide, please. So I'll go rather quickly here. So going to cover a couple of things, the CDC program, and then a couple of other services that are worked through our department to provide housing stabilization and other rental relief services. So the CDC program, as I'm sure many folks have heard of, was designed and implemented through really deep collaboration across multiple city or district agencies and CBOs. Including those listed here, DHS, DEMPED, DHCD, and multiple CBOs, certainly including Housing Counseling Services, which we heard from, and OTA and others, to come up with the best way to deliver these federal funds to folks in the district who needed it most. These were, over a quarter billion dollars that the district received in 2 different tranches from the federal government in support of rental and utility assistance for folks impacted financially by the COVID pandemic. And the administration and the program design, like I mentioned just now, was a really collaborative process. We also contracted with Deloitte to run key aspects of the program, including the application portal, sort of the front door of the program. They ran a really robust call center to deal with, I think it was about 140,000 calls at the end of the program that folks from the district answered questions from folks in the district. And then they also helped a lot with analytics and reporting and other troubleshooting. Next slide, please. So the goal sort of, is to keep folks stably in their home, right? It's eviction prevention. So, we've been providing funds through this tranche of money that I mentioned since April 2021 is when it was launched. Over 53,000 applications have been approved and paid through the program, including multiple from similar or from the same households, because folks were able to apply more than once if they needed the assistance. Almost 250 million, or 12 million for rent rather, and almost 12 million or over 12 million for utilities. So we were pretty nation leading in the pace with which we spent the funds and got them into the hands of folks who needed it most in the district. And we were recognized as such. We were one of, I believe, 5 jurisdictions to receive additional funds, the 17 million you see here from the federal government because of our performance, and we requested additional funds and we received some of them. As such, though, we are not accepting applications currently because we've spent down the funds. These funds, the $17.7 million, will be used to pay for applications that have been approved already through the program, and also to help support sort of mission-aligned programs through the district and to further the efforts in rent stabilization and eviction prevention. And just a sort of information for residents. The stay@dc.gov email inbox is still very much alive, and over a dozen people are working that every day responding to inquiries. The call center no longer works, but the email inbox and there's other information online that you can seek out at the Stay DC website. Next slide, please. So this was mentioned a few times. A very related program that sort of predated and will post-date the Stay DC program is our local district-funded emergency rental assistance program, or Ewrap. So this year, or this sort of fiscal year, since October 21, Ewrap has been accepting applications for assistance for folks. Designed, similar in many ways to the Stay DC program, a little more specific and narrow in terms of can you go back one slide, please? Thank you. In terms of the application process and who qualifies, it's a bit of a lower financial level, household income level, for instance. The sort of extent of the applications, the number of months one can receive funds for is a little bit narrower, but Still a very robust program, typically about a $15 million a year budget. But because of the need we're seeing and the pace with which we are spending the funds, the district has been allocated an additional 19 million to supplement the pre-existing 15. So that program is open. We encourage folks to visit the website you see on the screen here if they are interested. And since the closure of the CDC program in late October, we've seen nearly 4,000 applications through the Ewrap program. So clearly the need is there, and we are doing everything we can to make sure the funds exist to help continue to fund and support folks in need during this very complicated time. Next slide, please. In eviction prevention, colleagues from these agencies have already spoken, but obviously the Office of the Tenant Advocate is an amazing resource for folks that are experiencing potential eviction situations to get advice and help there. The Ewrap program I just listed are other tenant resources that exist in addition to all of what my colleagues and friends on this call have already mentioned. So services are there. The Ewrap program is the best resource right now through DHS, and we welcome any questions or thoughts from folks and look forward to continuing to serve residents of the district. And I think that is it. Next slide. There you go. Thank you guys
Joseph,
so much.
thanks so much. I really appreciate your presentation and filling in for your boss at the last moment. Thank all of the panelists and all the experts that have provided critical information to the audience tonight. If we didn't have the phones muted, I'm sure we'd hear a round of applause. So thank you all. I think we are running pretty much on time, which is great. We have allotted about 25 minutes for our question and answer session. A very important part of our presentation tonight is to take questions from the audience. Remember, use the chat feature on your computer to send us your questions. We will have a DISB team member read your questions and direct it to an expert. And if you're calling from the phone, use the *3 feature to raise your hand, and we will allow you to ask the question directly. So with that, I will open it up for questions, and we'll unmute the phone lines. But before we get started with questions from the audience, I have a couple of questions for the panelists while we're waiting for questions to come in. So my first question is for Jessica Russell with CFPB. And my question is, if folks opt for forbearance, how does forbearance affect their credit?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we've gotten a few times as the pandemic has progressed. So it's a little bit of a complicated answer, but forbearance is sometimes noted on your credit report, but any pause payments will not generally be reported as delinquent. Second, you may have to wait to get a new loan. So if you see interest rates and you want to refinance, that's often not an option if you're currently in forbearance. But once you exit, you may have a waiting period and then be able to refinance. That may be a 3-month waiting period, or it could be longer, like a year. Lastly, if you do stop making mortgage payments without a forbearance, that information will generally be reported directly to the credit reporting agencies and can have a lasting impact. So definitely reach out. I will note also that you can now check your credit reports actually weekly from the 3 credit reporting companies. So that's also an option, just so you can make sure that the forbearance is being reported correctly. And if you have difficulties with that, or you're reporting it and having a hard time with the companies, you can file a complaint with the CFPB.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So one more question before we go to the chat feature. I think this is for Ben Arnold from DISB or Ronald Clarkson. So you indicated that the foreclosure moratorium has been extended to June 30th, 2022. Does that mean folks should just stop paying their mortgage and then start again on June 30th?
Ronald, I'll jump in there real quick. Absolutely not. You should, if you have the wherewithal, the ability to make the mortgage payments, you should always continue to make the mortgage payments. The moratorium is allowing time for homeowners to get back on their feet. And then also with the Homeowner Assistance Fund, which DHCD kind of spoke to with kind of being opened up in the spring. Hopefully that'll allow those homeowners that need financial assistance the ability to kind of get caught up on their payments utilizing the Treasury funds that DC was able to garner.
Thanks so much. So, Mr. Abdullah, anything coming in through the chat feature?
Yes, we do have a question. Basically, I'm trying to assist an elderly neighbor whose family has held onto her house for almost 100 years. She was poorly advised by a coworker who did her taxes. She is in desperate need of some modifications to assist her with her mobility issues. And a close friend who lived with her contributed to her household income died during the COVID, so there's a loss of income as well. She only earns $25,000 a year in Social Security and has no other income. So we're basically talking about an elderly neighbor who has lost some of their rental income, and they're looking for some kind of mortgage modification. I have to go back to my mainstay. I think this question needs to be directed towards Mr. Ron Clarkson over at Housing Counseling Services first.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for that. Actually, as I read the question, and I hope I'm correct here, I'm also seeing where the main focus seems to be getting the home repaired and getting some accessibility features added to the home. If that is the case, then that individual should look into the single family residential rehab program, which is funded through the DC Department of Housing and Community Development. We do have counselors on staff to help people apply for that program. And we do offer an opportunity to participate virtually in a webinar format. And also you can participate by phone with us on a workshop about the single family residential rehab program. But in this case, it sounds like a real conversation with a counselor might be more beneficial. So I would encourage them to call our office at 202-667-7706 and ask about the single family residential rehab program. And that program is geared to providing some means to make the home more accessible.
Thanks so much, Sharon. I have a question for Nicole McEntee with OTA. If I'm a landlord, where do I go to get this basic business license?
Oh, excellent question. So landlords go through DCRA to get the basic business license. They must have that, and they must have a certificate of occupancy in order to offer rental housing to somebody, with one exception if they're offering a single family unit, so like a basement dwelling, for example. And tenants can actually verify that their landlords have these documents, so that they have a basic business license, they have a certificate of occupancy, and that they've registered with the Rental Accommodations Division, which is another requirement. Those are all three things that tenants can look for online or by contacting DCRA and DHCD, or they can also call our office and we're happy to assist them with looking that up.
Excellent, thanks so much. Mr. Abdullah, do we have any other questions coming in through the chat?
Oh, they're coming in strong now.
Okay.
The next question is, an individual said that I just moved from New York and looking to be a tenant here in DC. Do I have to go ahead and get a DC license for me to be able to apply for the federal housing benefits? I would like to find a place to rent as soon as possible, but any feedback about this would be great. I would like to send this over to the Office of the Tenant Advocate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not entirely sure which federal housing benefits the question is referring to. I will say that if you're looking for affordable housing, I would certainly recommend, as my colleague from DHCD indicated, DC Social Serve is a website that lists affordable housing available in the district, including the Inclusionary Zoning program. So I would highly encourage you to look into that program. You do not need a DC license, I believe, to receive an inclusionary zoning certificate, but you do need, if you're going to claim that you have DC residency, you would just need to be able to prove that in some way. And then if you are a new resident of DC, welcome. I hope you love DC and enjoy the city as much as I do. And I would encourage you to please take our renters' rights class so that you understand what your unique DC rights might be, and also to read the Tenant Bill of Rights document, which is available on our website, which essentially lists the 14 sort of most significant rights that tenants have in the district.
Thank you. Let me ask a question before we go back to the chat. I think this is for Ronald Clarkson at Housing Counseling Services. Who qualifies for housing counseling? Anyone?
Yes. I know that was short, but yes, as a matter of fact, we serve anybody regardless of income, regardless of where you're located within the city. We serve the entire city. There are other counseling organizations spread out throughout the city as well. So there may be another organization that's physically located near you. But yes, we're serving everybody in the District of Columbia, and we have HUD-approved housing counselors to do so.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mr. Clarkson. Mr. Abdullah, any questions, any more questions coming through the chat?
Yes, they're coming in thick. And the next question is, in reference to the Stay DC program, the consumer applied for the program on behalf of their mother during the extension. They can't recall when, but it says her application is still in review. The question is, should I reach out to the email box noted during the presentation for an actual status? The gist of the question is they're trying to get a status update on their DC Stay program application. And their question is, should they just reach out to the email that was in the presentation or what? So a person from DC Stay, was that with Department of Human Services or DHCD?
Yeah, that was me with DHS. Great question. So first of all, the inbox stay@dc.gov is always an option. But I can tell you what I would respond to when I get that email is if your application portal right now says processing or something like in review or language that sort of sounds like it's not quite done yet. We're in the very, very last bit of the reviews of the applications that we have in our system. So there should be final answers going out to the remaining folks in that list in the next week or two, I would say. So that's kind of the best answer I can give now. And once those final answers are given, whether it's a rejection or an acceptance and specifics around the payment amount, there will be an email that goes out to the applicants. But if you don't hear in the next kind of week or so, sometimes delays happen. Absolutely feel free to email stay@dc.gov and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can with the best information we have.
The next question is, first of all, they stated, thank you for all your terrific presentations. But what was the thinking behind the Stay DC program, excluding relatives providing rental housing from seeking assistance for tenant relatives? In other words, what was the thinking behind DC Stay, again, excluding relatives that were providing rental housing from seeking assistance for tenant relatives, especially given the early COVID-related release of returning citizens in the middle of the pandemic and not able to get other kinds of assistance? You
Sure.
wanna take a stab at that one? That's an
Yeah, and I
interesting.
might, Danilo, I might lean on you as well. So I believe, so my understanding, and I joined sort of midstream into the program, but early on there were considerations around just, you know, kind of fraud prevention and quality assurance and sort of security around making decisions on what is accepted versus what is not. However, I think midstream that was actually changed so that family members renting with appropriate evidence of leases and all of those appropriate documentations were able to actually apply for the program. Danilo, is that accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So when the program started, the I think looking at what Treasury was saying in the regulations and given sort of past practice and other programs, the notion of sort of a relative leasing from another relative was thought to be something we wanted to discourage. However, you know, with the program and continued guidance from Treasury and, you know, again, the district, as you said, sort of number of people being in this situation, that did change. And actually it was within a month or so of the program being open that we began that process of changing it. But initially, and for folks to understand, the state program was rolled out, and each sort of month for a while there, they gave us new regulations about what we could and couldn't do.
We have another question related to Stay DC. This consumer stated they were denied assistance, but was not given an explanation why. What additional information was needed, or given an option to speak with a human? Is there an option to speak with someone at this point for assistance?
To get detailed answers on the reason that an application may be rejected by speaking to somebody at this point is a little difficult. That said, I am a human being and I am on those emails, and I often call people to help the best I can. So I would just, again, encourage them to email stay@dc.gov if they're looking for that information. But as a sort of general rule, you know, folks who were rejected should have received at least one, and often more than one, email asking for whatever specific documentation or information may not have arrived or been uploaded to the portal. And again, this is based on federal regulations that govern the use of this money. So proof of income, for instance, a lease, the full lease that has a signature on it with the address matching the address being applied for and the identification. You know, we try to have as low of a barrier as we can while ensuring we're being good stewards of these federal dollars and getting them out as quickly as possible, but with, you know, ensuring we're doing it while assuring quality. So rejections typically are because of lack of appropriate documentation, or sometimes income rates being higher than the allowable limits, and things of that nature.
I have a question for Jessica Russell from CFPB. If you were in forbearance and now you're coming out, will someone have to pay back all the paused payments at once?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is generally no. It depends a little bit on the type of mortgage you have, but consumers who got forbearance and have a government mortgage, so that could be, you know, an FHA, VA, one of the Fannie or Freddie loans, those are generally not required to repay their skipped payments all at once. The best option there is to talk to your servicer and find out what your options are. And again, if you're having difficulty reaching your mortgage company or are confused by their communications, highly, highly recommend you speak with a housing counselor. They can provide you customized advice. And if you have a complaint about your company, please do send us a complaint. We read many of those. We use them. The company will respond within typically about 15 days, but we also read those to see if there's a pattern of a specific company that's creating problems for consumers, and we will often look into those more closely.
Great, thanks so much. So Michael, is there anything coming in from the phone lines?
I'm not seeing anything from the phone line just yet, but we still got about at least 4 or 5 questions still in the chat.
Okay.
Mr. Abdullah, there are two people that have their hands raised on the telephone as well. But whenever you get to it, I guess.
So, did you want to go to some the phone questions?
Let's go to one phone question and then go back to the chat.
Okay.
The attendee with the telephone number that starts with 240-703. I want to unmute you now so you can ask your question.
Three-part question. Hello, I have a three-part question. First part is, has the single-family residential application been updated? I've been denied 3 times, and I've tried to contact Sean Wallace on several occasions to find out what's going on. I'm only interested in the roof portion. I am a disabled Ward 7 senior, and the denial that I've found out was that the program is connected to a loan program, and because I was not able to qualify for the loan, they were not able to further my application to get the roof replacement because the program, they said, was tied together, which is pretty difficult. Second question. Oh, okay. Second question is, I tried to apply for forbearance and found out that I was able to get a modification. However, the modification is more than a third of my income, and I was looking to perhaps rent rooms, I guess, maybe to try to supplement the income. And I was wondering if I'm not able to do that, is there a program, maybe the STAY program, that can help me so I don't kind of go underwater, since just getting approved for a modification? And then the other thing is, I forgot the third one, so I do apologize.
Great. So who wants to take that first question?
They're probably both for me at DHCD.
Okay.
So it sounds like you may have applied to the single family rehab program some time ago. And I'm not sure, but right now we only offer grants. And so applying for a loan or being accepted for a loan should not be a concern. So please apply again, or you can reach out to me directly and I can connect you with someone in our office to see what happened. Or again, reaching out through our community-based organizations again. If it was a while ago, that may be the quickest thing to do, is reach back out to a community-based organization and reapply. But it is a grant now for roofs and accessibility. So a loan or applying to a bank, or previously, it was also the case that we might have asked you to apply to a loan to a bank, and if you got rejected, could you come into our program? That's no longer the case. So please apply again. In terms
Excellent.
of
The other question was, oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say just quickly on the other question, maybe the third one relates to me as well, but the third one you asked about assistance in terms of paying your mortgage and so on. I would encourage you to go to a counselor as soon as possible. So again, the community-based organizations such as Housing Counseling Services, but the program that I mentioned, the Homeownership Assistance Fund, may be able to sort of help you beyond any sort of deferral or that sort of thing. So that's something that's coming, but it's something that may offer some hope. But if you get into a counseling office sooner rather than later, they can begin to work you through those options to relieve that burden.
Great, thank you. Also, because I'm calling in, I don't have access to the slides. Would that be something that could perhaps be sent out to me? Because I wasn't sure if you said it was the Homeownership Assistance Program or not, and I didn't get any of the telephone numbers, especially for yourself.
Yeah, so I think the presentations will be provided to folks who are interested, please make sure you get Mr. Abdullah's contact information at the end of the event, and I think he'll be able to provide those presentations to you. Idris, do you want to go
Thank
to
you
the,
also.
You're welcome. Do you want to go to the chat?
Yeah, but the individual who just spoke, I spoke with them. We spoke by telephone the other day. So basically, she knows how to get in contact with me, and we'll make sure that we get the slides out to her. But back to the questions. Is there an office that lower income condo owners can contact in regards to the regulation of condo fees? Is there an office that lower income condo owners can contact in regards to the regulation of condo fees? I really think there may be a DCRA issue. However, DHCD may have some insights into that as well. Danilo, did you want to take a stab at that?
Certainly. So again, this is a case where I would get in touch with a housing counseling agency. So the condos are sort of private entities, and there are certainly regulated, certainly in terms of quality and a number of things, but oftentimes things such as fees really are in the hands of the condominium board. And so understanding that and helping you sort of work through some of those things is something that a housing counseling agency that offers those services can help you figure out and address. If it is a question of condominium fee arrears, so not just simply that, you know, the condominium fees in your building have gone up to a point where you really can't afford them in general sense, but that you've fallen behind and you need help catching back up, that is again something that the Homeowner Assistance Fund, this federal program we're rolling out, can assist with. So again, I think there's not an office, you know, that deals with condominium fees particularly, but through our network of housing counselors and some of the assistance programs, we may be able to help.
Thank you so much, Danilo. There was another question, one of which was, how do you go about selecting housing with inclusionary zoning intentions? And what is my limit? And I think that's somewhere in between Housing Counseling Services with their inclusionary zoning webinars and DHCD. Mr. Clarkson, do you want to take a stab at that first, and then maybe Danilo can follow up?
All righty, sure. Well, in terms of how folks are selected, the actual lotteries are held by DHCD. There's no regular schedule to them, but they are held by DHCD. And once folks are selected, then they are put into priority categories where, first of all, district residents and folks who work in the District of Columbia are given top priority. But it is a totally random process. It's not something where anybody can give you an estimate on how long it will take for your name to be selected. And so, and that, believe it or not, is the number one question that we get with regard to that program is how long will it take? Unfortunately, there is no answer to that question. It is an absolutely randomized process. And we just encourage folks to stay engaged with their emails, because when you are selected, you will be notified by email, and to monitor as well your spam and junk mail folder for those emails.
Yeah, and that was excellent. That's exactly correct. What I would add is that what will happen is that when a building is opened and there are new inclusionary zoning units available, or when someone moves from an inclusionary zoning unit and that is available, the inclusionary zoning folks will look at their records and see who qualifies for that unit. Were you interested in rental? Were you interested in owner? What was your income level, et cetera? And then they will send out a message to everyone saying, are you interested in this unit? And then from there, it is a random process who among those folks gets selected. So So please look out for your emails, as Ronald said. That's so important. And the other thing I'll say is that every 2 years, you do need to renew that registration, because again, we want to make sure we've got a list of people who are genuinely interested so that we can get people connected with housing as quickly as possible. But again, that's another reason. If you change email addresses, if you change phone numbers, let us know. So, and Ronald can help or others can help, but let us know, because that's the best way to stay connected.
Thank you so much for those answers. We're almost close to time. I want to take one more question if the person from the phone line is still on, and then one more person from the chat, and then I think it'll be time to wrap up. Is the person that called in still on the line?
Actually, the second caller is no longer on the event. He must have hung up.
Okay, we'll take 2 questions then from the chat.
Okay, the question is, if you have no income but want to become a homeowner or get affordable housing for a family of 4, how would you go about doing so? How would you go about getting affordable housing for a family of 4 if you don't have any income?
If I may.
Yeah.
I'm a housing counselor, and we wrestle with questions like this often. Basically, we also have to work on making sure that people understand the realities of housing. It takes income. You have to you have to have some income to acquire housing. It's a fact of life. And sometimes we have to give people that hard advice that they've got to find some type of income stream. Now, it might be persons incapable themselves of doing it because there may be a disability involved or something like that. Maybe there are other people in the household who need to contribute to the income to help with acquiring that housing. But it does take sometimes some difficult conversations with people to understand the realities that housing, especially in the District of Columbia, where it is very expensive, housing is going to require that you come up with some assets of your own, some income of your own to help you make that purchase. That's just the blunt reality of it. And we understand that there are difficulties with regard, or concerns, I should say, with regard to, maybe children being in the home and all of that. But the reality of buying a home these days is that it takes income. And we need to have that heart-to-heart discussion about finding some type of income stream to help facilitate that.
Great answer, Mr. Clarkson. And the final question is basically, how do I get help with a home purchase as a first-time home buyer? How do I get help with a home purchase for a first-time home buyer? I see Mr. Clarkson smiling. I think both Mr. Clarkson and Mr. Pelletier could weigh in on this particular question.
Okay, I think it's going to be kind of a handoff with Mr. Pelletier in that there is a program that DHCD has called HPAP that will assist with that. And here you go. Unmute yourself.
There we go.
It's almost perfect.
So yes, the HPAP program that Mr. Clarkson and all of our home ownership counselors are familiar with is probably the most obvious choice for most folks and one of the most helpful programs there are. As I said, it can provide up to $84,000 of assistance to buy a home, which in this market isn't as great as it used to be, but it is a significant amount of money that can help you buy a home. It does take time. It's a process. We've tried to make it as easy as we can, but get started early if that's something that you're interested in. As I said, inclusionary zoning is also a way to become a homeowner. In that case, you're not going to choose your home, but you're going to have some options to choose from if you're lucky. And there are some other programs that the DC Department of Housing, DC Housing Finance Agency, excuse me, the DC Housing Finance Agency. But again, these are all things that that Mr. Clarkson and others can help you be assisted with. And again, I also want to mention the frontdoor.dc.gov, because that also on that website, for those of you who are familiar and comfortable with websites, you can type in a relatively small amount of information and it will tell you all the programs that are available to you. So if you type in, I want to be a homeowner, it will help you connect with those.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, it's 7:30. The time just flew by. If we were in person, this would be the time where you get a standing ovation. It seems like from the questions that are still coming in and the interest, we should do this again sometime soon. I want to thank each and every one of the expert panelists, the organizers of this particular event, and the audience for your attention, your participation, and your questions. Special appreciation has to go out to Commissioner Woods for allowing this particular event, Aaron Sheath for getting the ball rolling, Ron Clarkson, we couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much, and the team here at DISB for really doing the heavy lifting. I hope you have benefited from this important forum. Please visit the DISB website at disb.dc.gov for more information about our programs and resources, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And with that, good night, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you again. Thanks so much.
Say what? Yeah. Let's get you some. I'm sorry, no. Where's everybody? If you ask these questions, I'm saying
Things are still heard.